My hands are shaking right now as I write this. I don't know how to start, not really, but I know I have to try because I believe someone out there needs to read this. My name is Amina Al-Fahad. I am 38 years old. I was born in Medina, Saudi Arabia, and I grew up in a home where prayer was not a choice. It was just what we did. My mother prayed 5 times a day. My grandmother prayed 5 times a day. We fasted, we gave to the poor, we covered ourselves, we read the Quran every week. Nobody in my family ever asked why we did these things. We just did them, the same way you breathe without thinking about it. I need to tell you about my life before I tell you about what happened to me, because if I don't, you won't understand why that day changed me the way it did. I became a widow when I was 30 years old. My husband, Youssef, died of a sudden heart problem. He was only 34. We had been married for 9 years and we had 2 children together, a boy and a girl. The morning it happened, I remember every small detail even now. I remember the phone ringing too early. I remember my sister's voice and how it sounded wrong, too careful, too slow. I remember sitting down on the kitchen floor because my legs would not hold me anymore. After that, there is a part of that day I cannot fully remember. It is like my mind decided to protect me from it. Youssef was not a perfect man, but he was a good man. He prayed. He worked hard. He loved our children. When he died, I felt like the ground under my whole life had cracked open, and I was just falling into it with nothing to grab onto. For the next 7 years, I raised my children alone. My father helped when he could. My brothers helped when they could. But most days it was just me in a small apartment, doing everything by myself, and feeling very small in a world that does not make much space for a widow without a husband to stand beside her. During those 7 years, I held onto my prayers the way you hold onto a rope when you are standing at the edge of something high. Prayer was all I had. I prayed even more than before. I read the Quran even more than before. I fasted extra days. I gave more in charity than I could really afford to give. I did all of this because somewhere deep inside me, there was a question I never said out loud, not to my mother, not to my sister, not even to myself in a clear way. The question was simple, but it scared me every time it came close to the surface. The question was, is this enough? Am I good enough? When I die, will Allah be pleased with me, or will I fall short? I never got an answer, and not having an answer became its own kind of pain, a quiet one that lived in my chest every single day for 7 years. And in the spring of 2024, a woman from my neighborhood told me about a gathering. It was for widows, she said, Muslim widows from all over the country meeting together in Mecca to pray and to support one another. She said there could be as many as 30,000 women there. I remember thinking maybe it would help to be around other women who understand what I carry. Maybe I would feel less alone for a few days, so I signed up. I told my mother I would be gone for 3 days. I packed a small bag. I had no idea, none at all, what was waiting for me there. The gathering was held in a very large hall. I won't describe exactly where because I don't think the exact place matters as much as what happened inside it. When I walked in, I saw women everywhere as far as my eyes could see, all in their abayas, all with their heads covered, sitting in long rows that seemed to go on forever. Something rose up in my chest when I saw them, a kind of recognition. Here are women who know what I know. Here are women who carry what I carry. We prayed the sunset prayer together, all of us at once. I don't know how to explain what that sounded like. Thousands of women saying the same words at the same time, bowing down together, sitting back up together. It felt like something moving through the room, like water moving or wind moving, except it was made of sound. When we finished praying and sat back in our places, there was a silence that fell over that whole hall. A heavy silence. A silence that felt full, not empty. Like everyone in the room was holding their breath at the same moment, without planning to. And that is when it started. I have told this part of the story only a few times since it happened, and every time I struggle to find the right words. I will try my best here, but please understand, I am not a writer. I am just a widow trying to explain what my own eyes saw. The ceiling of that hall was gone. I know that sounds like something that cannot be true. I know it sounds strange to say it so plainly, but this is what I saw with my own eyes, so I have to say it plainly. Where the ceiling had been a minute before, there was now light. Not the light of the sun, not the light of the lamps hanging in that hall, a different kind of light completely. White, but with soft colors moving through it, colors I don't really have names for. It was warm somehow, even though I could not feel any heat on my skin. And it moved slowly, gently, the way calm water moves when there is no wind. Along with the light came a sound, not a voice exactly, not at first, more like a low sound that seemed to touch something inside my body rather than just my ears. I felt it in my chest. I felt it in my teeth, if that makes any sense at all. And when that sound reached me, I started crying without deciding to cry. The tears just came on their own, like water spilling over the edge of a cup that is too full. All around me, I heard the same thing happening to other women. Crying everywhere, all through that huge hall. It was not sad crying, not only sad. It was bigger than that. It was the kind of crying that happens when something very true and very large is standing right in front of you, and your body simply does not know any other way to respond. Then above the light, I began to see something like a place. I want to be careful here because I don't want to make it sound more than it was, but I also don't want to make it sound like less. It was not like a dream where things are blurry or keep changing shape. This was steady, clear, more clear somehow than the room I was actually sitting in. I saw wide open space, full of soft light like early morning, quiet and gentle. I saw shapes that I can only call buildings, though they were unlike any building I have ever walked past in my life. They seemed to glow softly from somewhere inside themselves. And there were people there, or forms that looked like people, moving through that space. Their faces, even from far away, seemed to hold a kind of peace and joy that I have never once seen on a human face in this world. They moved easily, without any struggle in their steps, like walking cost them nothing at all. Looking at this, something inside my chest felt like it cracked open. I don't have a better way to say it. Something that had been shut tight for years suddenly came loose, and grief and hope and fear and longing all poured out of that crack at the same time, so mixed together that I could not tell you where one feeling ended and the next one began. But then the vision changed. This next part is the hardest part for me to explain, because this is the part that turned my whole life in a new direction. That beautiful, glowing place seemed to move back a little further away, like it was pulling back from me. And between that place and where I was sitting, I began to see something else, a kind of gap. A space, or maybe a break between the beautiful place and myself. I cannot call it anything other than a gap, because that is exactly what it felt like. And somehow, without anyone telling me in words, I understood that this gap was real, that there was a way across it and a way to miss it completely. I understood in a way that went deeper than thinking, that you did not cross this gap simply by trying hard enough, or by doing enough good things in your life. Something else was needed to make the crossing, something I did not have inside myself. When I looked at that gap, real fear came over me, fear like I had never felt before, not even in the terrible days after my husband died. This was not a fear of dying. This was a fear of being wrong, a fear that all those years of praying, all those extra fasts, all that charity I had given, none of it had actually closed the space between myself and that place I was looking at. A fear that I was still standing on the wrong side. Around me, I could feel that every woman in that hall was going through the exact same thing, even without turning my head to look at them. The crying had changed. It had become heavier, more desperate, almost like a kind of grief that comes from realizing something too late. Some women had fallen to their knees with their hands pressed against their faces. Some were rocking back and forth where they sat. Some had lowered themselves all the way to the floor, not in the position we use for prayer, but in the position of someone who has stopped pretending everything is fine. I will never forget the sound of that many women crying together in that moment. I still carry it inside me. I think I will carry it for the rest of my life. It was the sound of something breaking open, all at once, in thousands of hearts at the same time. Then something new appeared in the vision. A figure. I want to be honest and only tell you what I actually saw without adding anything to it that was not there. I saw a form, covered completely in light, so much light that I could not make out any clear details, but I could tell it was a person, a presence, someone. And this figure stood right where that gap was, right at the edge of the break I had been staring at with so much fear. What came from this figure, I have no good word for. The closest word I have is love, but even that word feels too small and too plain. It felt like love, but love that had grown so large it had become something else entirely, something that could stand there in front of thousands of people at once and still reach every single one of them completely. I could barely breathe for a moment. Then, without hearing an actual voice out loud, without anyone speaking words the way we speak to each other, something was revealed to me. It came clear and quiet, gentle, like it was placed directly inside my understanding rather than spoken into my ears. It was shown to me simply that the crossing had already been made, that I could not make this crossing on my own, no matter how hard I tried, but that it had already been done for me. And if I would receive it, the gap between us would close completely. I'm crying again just writing this down. Even now, so much time later, this part of the story still brings tears, because what was shown to me answered the question I had carried quietly for 7 long years. Am I enough? And the answer, gently but clearly, was no. Not because I was a bad person, but because no person, no matter how faithful, can cross that gap alone through their own effort. No number of prayers, no number of fasts, no amount of charity is enough on its own to make that crossing. But right after that came something else. It was shown to me that someone else was enough, and that this someone was offering the crossing to me as a gift, something I did not have to earn. I had never in my whole life heard anything close to this idea. Everything I had ever been taught said the crossing was something you worked for, something you built slowly, deed by deed, hoping that in the end your good actions would weigh more than your bad ones on some final scale. That is what I believed my whole life. That is what every woman sitting in that hall that night had believed, most of us since we were small children. We had spent our whole lives trying to add enough weight to the right side of that scale, and now it was being shown to us that the scale was never the way across. There was something else, a crossing already made, and somehow, without being told in plain speech, I came to understand whose crossing this was. It is hard to explain how a person can know something shown to them in a vision rather than told to them in ordinary words, but I knew. It settled into me slowly, the way truth settles, not like a sudden shock, more like something that had always been true finally becoming visible to me. I understood that the figure standing at that gap, the one who had made the crossing, was Issa, who you may know as Jesus. We already knew his name. We had always known of him. In the faith I grew up in, he is honored greatly, a prophet born of a virgin mother, a man who worked miracles beyond ordinary explanation. But I had never once been taught what was now being shown to me, that he was more than a prophet, that his death long ago was not simply a sad ending, but was itself the crossing being made once for everyone. Sitting there in that huge hall, surrounded by thousands of women who each carried their own version of loss and loneliness and quiet fear, I made the biggest decision of my whole life. Without really deciding to, I opened my hands, palms up, resting on my knees, and inside myself quietly I said yes. I said, if this is real, if you truly made this crossing for me, then I receive it. I do not understand everything yet. I have so many questions still sitting inside me, but I say yes. Something shifted in me the moment I said that. The empty place inside my chest, the one I had tried for 7 years to fill with more prayer, more fasting, more good deeds, the one that had never once been filled no matter how hard I tried, that place was suddenly touched by something. Filled, gently and completely, not with a burst of feeling but slowly, quietly. The way water fills a cup starting from the bottom, and the fear that had gripped my stomach so tightly loosened, just like that. I found I could breathe fully again, all the way down, for what felt like the first time in years. Looking around me, I saw the same thing happening to other women nearby. Faces that had been buried in their hands were lifting up. Women who had been crying with their heads down were now looking upward, toward where the vision was slowly fading, the ceiling of the hall slowly becoming an ordinary ceiling again. Some women were still crying, but it sounded different now. There is a kind of crying that comes when something painful is taken away from you, and there is another kind that comes when something good is given to you. Both wet your face the same way, but they come from very different places. It took a long time for that hall to become quiet again. When the women running the gathering finally came back to speak, something had clearly changed for them too. A woman named Rainier, a widow from Jeddah who had helped organize the event, stood at the front for almost a full minute without saying anything at all, just standing there with tears running down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice broke more than once, and what she said, roughly, was that we had all just seen something none of them had planned for, and that we needed to talk about it together, right there before anyone left. So we did. For hours women stood up one after another and shared what they had seen. Every account had small differences, but the large parts matched every single time. Everyone described the light. Everyone described the beautiful place, the gap, the figure standing there. Everyone described a feeling of understanding settling into them without being told in plain words. And every single account, everyone, pointed to the same name at the center of it all. I need to be honest with you and say that not every woman in that hall accepted what she had seen. Some resisted it, right there in the moment, and I understand why. There were women there who had been Muslim their entire lives, whose mothers and grandmothers had been Muslim before them, just like me. Women who understood clearly that saying yes to what they had seen would cost them things that mattered deeply, their families, their standing in their communities, maybe even their safety. Nobody pretends that accepting this in a country like Saudi Arabia, in a city like Mecca, comes without any cost at all. I remember women near me shaking their heads, saying this could not be real, that it must be some kind of test, that we could not follow this path. I understood them completely, because those same thoughts had passed through my own mind too. I felt the full weight of what saying yes would cost me, and I still said yes, because I could not go back to that empty place inside me. Not after seeing what I had seen. In the weeks after the gathering, I learned through phone calls and quiet conversations that what happened in that hall had spread beyond the women who were there. Small groups began forming in different homes, in different cities, women meeting quietly, carefully, usually no more than 8 or 10 at a time, because gathering in larger groups was not safe for this. Some women I later met had already known something about Jesus for years, through reading they had done in secret, and had never told anyone. Others, like me, were starting from nearly nothing, searching hard to understand more about who this person truly was. I had a cousin whose name I will not write here to protect her, who had believed quietly for many years without ever telling our family. After the gathering, I called her and I told her everything. There was a long silence on the phone. Then she began crying, and she told me she had been waiting for that call for a very long time. A few days later, she brought me a small copy of the New Testament in Arabic, easy to hide, easy to keep out of sight. I read it at night after my children had gone to sleep. My cousin told me to start with the book of John, so I did. I remember reading about the things this man said, and how different they sounded from anything I had read before. He did not simply point people toward following rules, or promise that enough good deeds might eventually open a door. He spoke about himself directly, in a way I had never encountered in any other teacher or prophet. That was hard for me to sit with. I won't pretend every page came easily or felt comfortable right away. There were nights I closed the book and just sat there, hands on my face, trying to make sense of what I had just read. But underneath all my questions, that settled feeling in my chest, the one that had started in the hall, never left. It stayed steady. And over time, I learned to trust that steadiness more than I trusted my own ability to understand everything perfectly. Reading about the crucifixion was the hardest part for me. In the faith I was raised in, we are taught that Jesus did not actually die on the cross, that someone else died in his place, that God would not allow such a thing to happen to his prophet. But as I read the accounts for myself, and thought back to the vision, to the gap, to the figure standing there, I began to understand something different. The crucifixion was not a defeat or a mistake. It was the crossing itself. It was the moment the bridge was built between us and that place I had seen glowing above the hall. He made that crossing, and then he came back, which is what I now understand the resurrection to mean. He came back to say simply, it is finished. The gap is closed, come through. I know there are people reading this, especially those raised the way I was raised, who will feel upset or hurt or confused by what I am saying here. I understand that completely, because not long ago I was one of those people myself. I am not asking anyone to agree with me only because I had this experience. I am only telling you honestly what I saw, and what has slowly grown inside me since that night. I am not a scholar. I am just a widow from Medina with 2 children and a small apartment and hands that still shake sometimes when I talk about this. I am not trying to argue anyone into anything. I am only telling my own story, as clearly and honestly as I can. In the time since the gathering, I have not lost the peace that entered my chest that night. I have not lost the sense of knowing where I am going, not because I have finally become good enough, not because of extra prayers or extra fasting, but because I was shown that someone else already made the crossing for me, and I said yes to it. My son, who is now 15, asked me one evening what had changed about me. He said, "Mama, you don't seem as afraid as you used to be." That question caught me off guard, because I had thought I was hiding my fear well over the years. But children notice more than we think. I told him I had found something at the gathering in Mecca, though I did not explain everything to him that night. I wanted to wait for the right moment, but I told him that I was no longer afraid of dying, that I finally knew where I was going. He looked at me for a long moment and said quietly, "I want that too." That conversation is something I keep close to my heart. It reminds me that whatever happened to me in that hall was never only for me. It moves outward, quietly, from one person to the next, through small changes in how we speak, how we carry ourselves, the peace that somehow shows up on our faces without us trying to put it there. Each woman who was in that hall with me has her own story of what came after. Some are further along in understanding than I am. Some are still sitting with their questions, unsure of what to do next. Some have gone back to their old way of practicing. unable for now to take this next step. I do not judge any of them for that. What was shown to us was shown to all of us equally that night. What each woman chooses to do with it is between her and God alone. I can only speak honestly for myself. I spent 30 years of my life trying to be enough, trying to earn my place, trying to stack up prayers and fasting and good behavior, hoping it would be enough in the end. For 7 of those years I did this completely alone, raising 2 children without their father, carrying an emptiness inside me that nothing I did could ever seem to fill. I was faithful the whole time. I never once skipped my prayers. I never gave up on my faith. I held on with everything I had in me. But it was not enough, not because I was somehow a bad person, but because the gap I saw that night was real, and no person can cross it alone through their own effort, no matter how hard they try. This is not something I only read about afterward in a book. This is something I saw with my own eyes, sitting in that hall in Mecca, surrounded by thousands of other women, all of us arriving at the same understanding in the very same moment. And then I saw who could make that crossing, and he did. And he offered what he had already done as a gift, freely, to anyone willing to receive it. I received it, and I am not the same woman who boarded that bus in Medina all those months ago. I am changed in ways I still cannot fully put into words, but I no longer feel the need to explain it perfectly, because the change itself is real, and it shows, quietly, on my face, the same way my son saw it before I ever said a single word to him about it. If you are reading this, and somewhere inside you there is your own version of that gap, your own version of the question I was too afraid to say out loud for 7 years, I want to speak to you directly for just a moment. You do not need to attend a gathering like the one I attended. You do not need to see anything like what I saw. Nothing dramatic needs to happen to you at all. What was offered to those thousands of women in that hall is the very same thing being offered to you right now, wherever you happen to be sitting as you read this. The gap is real. The crossing is real. The one who made that crossing is real. And all that is being asked of you is the same small thing I gave that night, sitting there with my hands open on my knees. Just yes. Just I receive what you have already done. I receive you. That is the whole of it. Nothing more complicated than that. My name is Amina Al-Fahad. I am a widow from Medina, Saudi Arabia, and I no longer carry the fear I carried for so many years. Not because I finally earned my way there, but because I said yes to the one who had already paid the way for me. Every morning now, when I wake up and put my feet down on the cold floor and begin another day of raising my children and living my ordinary life, I carry that yes quietly inside my chest, like a small steady light. And nothing about this life, not its hardships, not its loneliness, not the questions I still don't have answers for, has been able to take that light away from me. I do not shake anymore when I think about the day I will die. That, more than anything else I have described here, is the part I still find hardest to believe, and the part I am most thankful for.